At the end of the first and biggest ever Turtle Mania, largely caused by the first animated TMNT TV show from the 1980s and the 1990s and the live-action movies from the 1990s, TMNT video games lay dormant for almost a whole decade. As the last big TMNT video game to be released prior to 2003 was the NES version of TMNT Tournament Fighters, which released all the way back in 1994. After a new TMNT animated TV show started airing in 2003, Konami, the company who has made the best possible TMNT video games, was called upon again to try and capitalize on potentially the next Turtle Mania. This would be the second and the last series Konami would be able to make Ninja Turtles games for, which was a shame because I think a lot of studios who got the TMNT license for developing TMNT video games after Konami did not quite measure up to the quality of TMNT video games that Konami made, with the exception of Platinum Games. And they did one hell of a job as far as their return to making TMNT video games was concerned. TMNT was now back, and in both 3D and 2D. The more advanced PC and console versions, based on the TMNT 2003 TV show, had amazing 3D graphics and multi-directional scrolling, allowing you to move your character in 360 degrees motion. This was truly the first time it felt like you were controlling your character in episodes of the TV show, and back in 2003 it was glorious and a huge step up. The more basic handheld version stuck to the 2D graphics style of the predecessor video games based on the TMNT 1987 animated TV show. Technology for the handheld gaming systems like the Game Boy Advance had gotten advanced enough for the Game Boy Advance to be able to generate Super Nintendo level 16-bit graphics. Hence the graphics of the Game Boy Advance version of TMNT 2003 feel like they're straight out of the 1990s era of the TMNT video games. Now let's have a look at TMNT 2003, the PC and console versions, and TMNT 2003, the Game Boy Advance version, and rate them on our tier list. As far as the PC and consoles version of TMNT 2003 goes, this game is a total delight. This game is what made me a fan of the TMNT 2003 TV show because I stumbled upon the demo of this game. I got the full version of this game for my 16th birthday, and me and my best friend at the time rocked this video game. We played it after school when we got back home at the cost of staying hungry, and ended up staying up all night to beat the game the first weekend we had this video game. The combat was fast-paced and smooth. While not overly complicated, the game did let you do combo attacks, but if you weren't an expert at doing combo attacks, you wouldn't suffer as a result. Hence, combo attacks were a bonus when used, allowed you to really excel at this game. The enemies in this game were a mix of recognizable enemies from the previous versions of Ninja Turtles and newcomers. We start off by fighting the Mousers and Punks, similar to the very first enemies the Turtles fought in the 1987 TMNT TV show. The Foot Soldiers also make a return, but this time they're more similar to the human Foot Soldiers from the 1990s live-action movies, and not the robotic Foot Soldiers from the 1987 TMNT TV show. Remember all the robots the Turtles fought in the 1987 TV show? We have robotic enemies here too, like the Nano Robot. Hell, we even had Turtlebot, who was the metalhead of this universe. Hell, you even get to fight the Zurg from StarCraft in the second last act of this video game. While notable villains like Krang, Bebop, and Rocksteady were absent from this series, we got just as good newcomers like Hun, the new muscle, filling in for Bebop and Rocksteady. And we also got the Elite Foot Ninja. Good stuff. Returning villain Baxter Stockman now used a powerful battle mech instead of a small flying machine that dropped the Mousers, so a few of the villains even got a few upgrades. And those Shredder boss fights on top of the tower, damn, is this game awesome or is this game awesome? But that wasn't all. Want to play as some of the bosses and take on the Turtles? Want to use the Turtles to spar to settle the arguments about which Turtle is the best martial artist? Or just want to fight bosses on a 1 versus 1 basis in an equal powered match, the versus mode has you covered. This was like the only extra mode that I ever played and cherished in the TMNT video games from the 2000s. It was similar to the versus mode in the Super Nintendo version of Turtles in Time. However, in this game you could play as some of the villains and some of the additional heroes as well, like Splinter and Casey, whereas in the Super Nintendo version of Turtles in Time you could only do 1v1 matches among the 4 turtles, which was okay for a game released in like the early 1990s. So as far as this versus mode goes, me and another friend did a whole tournament back in the day where we took turns playing characters and fought other characters in a knockout tournament based format. And the tournament, I won that tournament using Michelangelo, as Michelangelo is the most valuable player in this game for me. That's what it feels like. The difficulty of the game is spot on as well. It's not too hard and it's not too easy. Play the game for the very first time and start the game without loading any save states. Make sure none of your characters are leveled up when you start playing the story mode, and this game will push you. It'll force you to play the game well and skillfully to beat the game, while not feeling the game is excruciatingly hard or impossible to beat, which is exactly the ideal difficulty for any single player or co-op video game. The only criticism I have for this game is that the 2 phases of the final boss fight versus Shredder are a little too easy. Back in 2003 even, it took me max 1 to 3 attempts to beat both the phases of the final boss fight versus Shredder, which was a little disappointing, as it did not feel like fighting an excruciatingly hard final boss. But everything else about this game is near perfect. Therefore, my rating for the PC and consoles version of TMNT 2003 is a solid 9 out of 10. Now, I've never really understood the criticisms for the gameplay being bland and repetitive for this game, and the graphics not working even by 2003 standards because of the 3D environments feeling awkward to control your character in. I feel none of these criticisms. In fact, I'd say this game's mechanics and controls are near perfect for a game released in 2003 and still hold up today. As for the gameplay being bland and repetitive, I couldn't disagree more. This game excelled because it kept the gameplay simple and focused 80% of the time on fighting and action. It didn't make you solve unnecessary and frustrating puzzles that you have to look up to solve in order to progress the game. Like, if I wanted to solve puzzles, I'd play a puzzle game and not a beat 'em up. Similarly, it didn't make us perform perfectly timed jumps from one platform to another just to progress the game. So again, if I wanted to play a platforming heavy game, I'd play something like Super Mario and not Ninja Turtles, because if you remember with Ninja Turtles, in the 2D fighting games, there was very little platforming. It was like beating up the opponents that was the focal point of the game. Like, there's a lot of platforming in the very first NES game they released, but because of all that, like, the very first NES game felt a little overcomplicated and didn't get a good reception, and then the sequels kept it simple. Like, the focus was fighting the enemies, going from left to right and fighting the enemies, and that's what made it good. So I don't know what these critics were really expecting. It's not meant to be a very in-depth competitive game like League of Legends or StarCraft, where people fiercely compete in a game in tournaments. It's a Ninja Turtles game. It's supposed to be meant for fun. So let's go to our tier list and place the PC and consoles version of TMNT 2003 in the rankings. For making us feel like we were controlling the characters in a Ninja Turtles episode of the TV show, having awesome gameplay mechanics, not being an overly complicated game, having good bonus modes such as the Versus mode, which was basically additional free content. The PC and console versions of TMNT 2003 earns the top spot on our top tier list by placing this game at the top of S tier. All in all, an amazing game, which was a treat and a delight. Let's move on now to the Game Boy Advance version of TMNT 2003, the handheld counterpart to this game. Playing the GBA version of this game is like a blast from the past. It feels like a sequel to TMNT 3, The Manhattan Project on NES, and a remake of TMNT 4, Turtles in Time on SNES, using the 2003 Turtles all blended together to create a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up masterpiece. There are a lot of attacks in the game for being a game on a handheld system. You had your regular weak attack that you could best use for doing fast combo attacks. You had your heavy attack that did significantly more damage when it hit, but it took away a very small portion of your life bar. And finally, you had a charge attack that let you do extra damage and or range projectile-like attacks, but left you vulnerable to being hit while you were charging your attack. So picking the right attack for the right situation was an added challenge to the game. The game again focused on 75% on combat and less on puzzle solving and platforming, which was a huge relief for me. There were also some nice vehicle segments, one in each chapter to break up the monotony and change up the gameplay, which were a welcome change of gameplay type that added more depth and variety to the game. The difficulty of the game is spot on as well. It's not too hard and it's not too easy. This game too forces you to play the game well and skillfully to beat the game, while not feeling like the game is excruciatingly hard or impossible to beat. I found the Giant Mouser, Hun, and Shredder boss fights particularly challenging, as I needed a lot of strategy and coordination to beat those bosses. The hench people also feel powered just the right amount. They're easy to beat down but can swarm you in large numbers, so you have to time your attacks just right and strategically to make sure you continuously dispatch them while dodging their attacks. The final boss fight versus Shredder really kicked my ass as a kid and caused me some grief, but as an adult I figured out how to defeat him by watching YouTube videos of gamers defeating him. The key to defeating Shredder in the GBA version is also timing your attacks just right and dodging his attacks. For example, dodging his attacks and hitting him with light attack combos when he levitates in the air and shoots his projectile attacks down at you, and swarming him with light attack combos in between his attacks. It's like when he morphs into the fire gremlins, you gotta attack at just the right angles to dispatch the fire gremlins fast before they do a lot of damage to you. Having a complex boss fight like this on a 2D handheld system in 2003, which required both skill and strategy to win, was impressive for the time. At face value, it feels like a very intimidating and excruciatingly hard boss fight if you try to win it just by trying to full-on assault Shredder, which is exactly what I did when I was a kid, causing this boss fight to be a total nightmare for me when I was a kid. But when you use proper skill and strategy, you can see it makes all the difference in winning this boss fight, which is what I did as an adult, and that caused this boss fight to go from being a total nightmare to being manageable to win, which again is pretty impressive for a game released on a handheld system in 2003. The graphics look stunning and are impressively animated for a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up, capturing the animation style and vibe of the TV show perfectly in 2D environments. And that music, like, just listen to this music. Like, is this music awesome or is this music awesome? It is for these reasons I place TMNT 2003, the Game Boy Advance version, in S tier, just behind TMNT 3, the Manhattan Project on NES, with a solid rating of 8.5 out of 10. Join me next time when I talk about the sequels to these games, TMNT 2 Battle Nexus, the PC and consoles version, and TMNT 2 Battle Nexus, the Game Boy Advance version. Until then, Cowabunga and Turtle Power. This is Mikey signing off. I hope you had fun watching this video.